My name is Reiner. I always go by Ray, and I'm a Cal State alumni, graduated in 2017. But once I thought about it, I knew I could come and talk to you guys about some of the things that helped me get through Cal State and get to where I am now. So bear with me. These are just some of the things that I thought I could share that could possibly help you on your journey. This is a picture of Cal State, 2001 and 2014. I wasn't there in 2001, but I think this picture is really cool as it really depicts how quickly and how much the campus is growing. I'm sure if we posted the picture of 2020, it would look even more massive. But for some of you, I know this might be your first year at Cal State, and for others, you already might know what the next 4 years would look like. But if some of you were like me and are feeling lost, this is just the beginning, and it's going to get better. Actually, I remember my first year at Cal State and walking through the academic hall. I was thinking that everyone looked so mature and knew what they were doing, as I was, really just anxious and unsure about the future. But I'm here now, right? One of the initial obstacles I had was trying to balance working and going to school full time. I worked down in Chipotle at UTC, and my commutes were extremely long, so it felt like I was spending more time commuting and thinking about tortillas and burritos rather than devoting that time to like studying or doing homework. It really started to affect my grades, most importantly, and I needed to make a choice, and I tried to find a job that was closer to my house. So I started to look at jobs at school, and I was able to apply for the math lab and eventually get hired there. I think so. It was immediately a better experience, not just working at the math lab specifically, but working on campus was great. The commute shortened dramatically, and I could fill those long gaps between my classes with working hours. There was definitely a lot of opportunities to network with others, and if you do eventually try to get a job on campus, it would be maybe more beneficial if you can try to get a job that associated with your major in some way. And if not, that's okay. There's always other ways to network. I think another obstacle of mine was motivation. I felt like I was dragging myself to class every day until I actively was trying to be positive and really trying to make an attempt to understand the content, even if it meant going to office hours with the professor. I tried to stop like negative feelings or feeling bad about not knowing things. For an example of that is like raising your hand for a question in class and then getting the answer wrong. It's okay to not know things, and it's what's more important is for you to recognize what you don't know so you can focus on it and get it eventually. And that's one of the things that we push for at work at Hunter. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Something that I would tell the students in the math lab that would always tell me that they, didn't like math or they were struggling with math was to try and revisit the problem when you aren't, when you're relaxing, when you're just, when you have some idle time. And what I mean by that is a lot of times when we have to do like math problems or even computer science problems, it's something that is due and we have to turn it in, or something we're going to get graded on. And I think for me, it was important to be able um, to do math where I didn't have that pressure behind it. So when I had off time where I was just like watching TV, I would bring out scratch paper and maybe just pull out one of the problems that I had trouble with in the past and just try it. I didn't have to turn it in. I didn't have to, get it graded. And it felt kind of more like almost like doing a crossword puzzle or something. I felt like I was um, subconsciously studying by attempting these problems, whether I finished them or not. Um, I think, lastly, something that really helped me to get to where I am now was trying to get out of my comfort zone. And what I mean by that is to actively join clubs and to participate in school events. I don't mean like large school gatherings. What I mean mostly is like hackathons or like STEM events where you can meet like-minded people or people in the same major even, um, and to share your projects. If you have some projects going on at home, if they're big or small, um, share your projects with people like fellow school members, whether it's a professor or another classmate, because you never know uh, what opportunities that could lead to. Um, this is actually how I got to work on my first project. I had a Raspberry Pi microcomputer. Um, I, this is actually what it looks like now, and this is the same one that I used back then. And I would try little experiments with it and side projects, and I would always tell my peers about it. Well, anyone that was willing to listen. And about a week later, I got an email from a director who had heard about one of these experiments that I was doing, and he reached out to me, and we ended up collaborating on a project, and that was really fun. I guess to keep going on that, when you go to club meetings like like the ACM, Associated Computing Machinery Club, that they typically have like newsletters where they'll send out lists of places looking for internships or like potential projects that you can all work on. And similarly, that's actually how I ended up as an intern at Hunter. I attended the ACM, and during one of their newsletter emails, they had mentioned that Hunter was looking for interns, and that's how I applied. So yeah, and I think, speaking of Hunter, I would go ahead and let me tell you a little bit more about Hunter. It's located in San Marcos, and it's a sprinkler. I always call it a sprinkler company. It's a company that works on irrigation and lighting fixtures. And it's actually really close to San Marcos. It's about like a 12-minute drive. And the director of software engineering is actually a Cal State alumni. So that's pretty cool. And I know you guys all think sprinklers are really cool, but Hunter does some pretty cool stuff with it. So right here, this is Petco Park, and Hunter currently maintains the basically the grass on the field. And if you look at the bottom picture to the right, you'll see yours truly as an intern. I think that was about 2017, and so they brought us down there to check out what our sprinklers are doing down there. So it's pretty cool stuff. We also have irrigation installments at Balboa Park to help keep the gardens hydrated, and we also have lighting fixture installation. So as you can see on the top picture there, Hunter has we call them FX Luminaire installments there. And I guess I would like to talk to you a little bit more about my experience at Hunter, and starting out as an intern there. So they actually had a bunch of intern spots available, and there was one particular position that I had my eye on, but I ended up applying for all of them. They had a mechanical engineering intern spot. I'm a computer science major, but I applied for it anyway. I was just interested in seeing, what I could possibly get to. Ultimately, I started out as an intern position in operation systems, and that actually has more to do with programming on the manufacturing line, when I really wanted to be in the core mob programming team. I stayed focused on my goals, and I kept pushing through, and now I am finally on the mob programming team, not as an intern, as a software engineer. So things didn't start out the way I'd intended, but if you keep focused and keep trying, things can work out.
So, Ray, could you tell us more about the process of you applying your internship and more about the interview process that you had to go through?
Sure. Yeah. So the intern process started out as me just going to their website, and I think like most websites, they have some sort of careers page where you fill out application information, and then you're required to also submit a resume. I didn't have any work experience on my resume, but having the projects, the ones that I did for the Raspberry Pi, and the one that I collaborated with the director on, really helped, and that I was able to put that on my resume. After that, you are to answer, I think as a part of the application, they have some like situational questions to try and get a better idea of what kind of social attitude a person might have, or behavioral. And if they'll respond, I think they responded anywhere from like 2 weeks to like a month. Within that time range, they responded and asked for an in-person interview. And during the in-person interview, there wasn't many. There was like no technical questions really, but they did ask me things like, what's like, why is your major computer science, or and then a little more in-depth things about the projects. So why did you even start this project? Trying to get a feel about how curious, probably how curious you might be, and or willing to learn things on your own. And after that, they'll ask you some more kind of like situational questions, like like if something happened, how would you respond, basically? And it has like a one, like strongly agree, strongly disagree, and they'll kind of create like a behavior statistics sheet for you, and so that you get some sort of score on that, and there's probably no like wrong or right answers, but it's for them um, to use and whether they find you a good fit or not. So after that, that was pretty much the interview process, and they'll usually follow up with you after that. And that was the majority of that process.
Any questions from anyone about how Ray applied for the internship or anything he had to go through? You guys are free to ask questions anytime. I'm monitoring the chat, so if you want to toss in something there. And I guess what was a little bit different, since it's an internship, so that they know that you're a student. But I know we talked about this a little bit, Ray, how a lot of times at interviews, they do want to see some problem solving skills come out of you, right? So I think you said that you have been on some hiring committees. So what's a technical type of interview question or interview experience that someone could be asked that's a little bit more technical?
Right. Yeah. So for the internship question, they didn't really ask me too many technical questions. In that sense, they kind of asked me how comfortable am I with Python or SQL. These are just some programming languages. More recently, when I was on the hiring end for interviews, some more technical questions might be geared specifically towards looking at code. So in this case, we kind of have interview code, essentially, where it starts out as maybe we'll want to assess, what level of, let's say, JavaScript that you might know. So we'll have a basic question of like, can you give me the square root of any number? And then we'll go from there. And the question's kind of, so the next question might be a little bit harder, and where we'll actually have code and ask them like, do you see any like oddities with this code, or we call them code smells? Do you see anything smelly about this code? And then that one doesn't really have any like right or wrong, or there's wrong answers, but doesn't really have like a solid answer at the end. What we're mainly trying to see is how a person approaches looking at a block of code they've never seen before, and if they're willing to reach out and ask some questions. Like we don't really expect the interviewee to ace the interview. We're just kind of looking for more of a person that is willing to tell us or to work with us, basically. Like getting stuck, and this kind of relates to what I was saying earlier. It's okay not to know things. What's more important is to find out what you don't know, so we can work on that. So that's what we look for during interviews as well. If the person gets stuck on something, we're kind of looking for them to reach out, like, this is what I think about the code so far. I think this should happen, and then that's where we are able to work with them on the code and give them tips and stuff.
Okay, good. So guys, you guys are in STEM, right? So you guys are working hard, and other majors would be like, oh my God, you're a STEM major, right? It's a lot of hours and putting in. But when you leave here, you are the specialized skilled worker, right? You're the problem solver. So it's not surprising that during these interviews, they want to get a sense of your problem solving ability. So not necessarily you know the answer, but as Ray said, how do you approach a problem? And also your people skills are a big part of things. We'll ask Ray what mob programming is a little bit later, but your people skills are a big part of it. So all this that kind of adds up to you, I mean, that's going to be really critical so that when you leave here, they're going to be looking to you and asking you, you know, can you roll with these situations? Walter's got a question. Great. Is it hard to find paid internships? As a college student that has to pay for our own tuition, I'd like to do an internship, but how would that go? So Ray, paid versus unpaid internships, any experience with that?
Yeah. So I think so this is just from my experience. I think most internships that were out there that I've seen were paid, and I think that also ties into the popularity maybe of that role. I think I think the only experience that I've had with internships has been paid internships.
I think it's a function of company and source, but since programming is pretty lucrative, you know, type of a thing. So I think it's probably easier to find paid internships in computer science, my guess. There are other internships that some people just do it for credit, but I feel like in the technical fields, companies kind of expect to compensate students, especially in the summertime. So I think any type of internship, especially as a summer internship, should be paid. And we should remember that Handshake remember the Career Center has that internship office section to them. And Handshake, I bet there's a filter in Handshake to find paid versus unpaid. So that's a really good question, Walter. And I've been there too. So.
Yeah, I'd like to open up the floor. If you guys have any more questions, I'll stop sharing so I could see the chat.
Okay, cool. So, and of course, your professor has tons of questions that he can always ask. That's why we're professors. But does anyone have a question to start with? So Walter asked one about paid internships versus unpaid. Any other, especially UCS majors and software engineering majors, any questions for Ray right now? I think for me, the obvious first question is, what languages should people be learning?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think for me, Python is a popular language. It's easier to I think it's easier to pick up quickly and to start spinning out projects. Like this Raspberry Pi was about like $30 or $40, and you can write Python code and have it interact with breadboard, basically with circuits. Another really good one I think is JavaScript. Almost all web pages use some form of JavaScript, and so if you want to get into like web development or creating web apps, that would be a good place to start.
And do you know what languages the classes at San Marcos typically focus on?
When I was there, It was, it might be different now, but it was mainly C++, and database management. That was SQL, which SQL, structured query language, is mainly used for manipulating databases, and that is something that would also be really useful, especially if you go into web development, as you will probably need to be interacting with a server at some point.
And we have a class for that, so right, they're going to learn that. Okay. Maybe as another kind of start, because we could ask about a lot about that, but maybe what's one day in your life look like? What time does it start? What do you do? Can we give people a sense of what your job day actually looks like?
Sure. Yeah. So everything, as of March, everything moved to remote work, and we're still able to have a positive. We're still able to be very productive. Our day starts at 8 a.m. and the first thing in the morning, what happens is what we call a stand-up, and it's just a short meeting. And actually, the reason why we called it a stand-up was when we all met together in person, you literally stood up, and no one really wants to stand up for that long. So that's what makes the meetings really quick. And basically, all teams within our group, Centralis, would talk about what they did yesterday and what they're going to do today. And this was also the time for our project manager to chime in and ask about if we're on the right track, or what priorities he has instead. We also have this thing called a Kanban board, where we have sections for to do things that we're doing and things that are completed. And this is essentially where we keep our tasks, and our project manager, it gives him visibility of what we're doing. And if we don't have any other sort of meetings, we would then just jump into programming up until lunch. Then we'd have like an hour lunch. On Tuesdays, we would sometimes have these things called retrospectives. And retrospectives were pretty much ways for us to communicate how we're doing individually, and not as a team. And so these are kind of like mini meetings facilitated by one person through a rotation. And those would usually last about an hour, and then we'd end up voting. We would end up voting on like things to talk about, or even possible action items to follow through with. After that, we would have the rest of the day to continue coding. And at about 4 o'clock, so for 1 hour every day, we have a whole hour that we can use, that we call learning hour. And that's when we all break off, and we are supposed to use that hour to learn something, whether it's about our own infrastructure, some implementation that will help us in the future, or some tooling. So you can learn about anything as long as it will benefit you as a software engineer and our code base. That's typically what the average day looks like.
So you're able to go home at 5 o'clock most days? Every day?
Yes. Yeah, that's the goal. Unless we also have this thing where it's kind of like a joke, not to push on Fridays in case something goes wrong and we have to fix it. I see a question from Miguel. Do you have weekends off? Yeah, we have weekends off.
Which I am a little jealous of, but that's okay. Assuming, of course, there must be times when there is a deadline or something and you have to do something. Although I guess, would you get overtime for that or no?
No. Yeah. So overtime doesn't. I think because we're salary, we don't get overtime. So it would be unfortunate if we had to work on the weekends.
Two more good questions. What is the average pay at your company for a software engineer? Just ballpark it.
So I guess for, let's say, for associate to mid-level, it would be 75 to 100 K per year.
Associate. So that's like after some seniority, right? So is entry a little bit more closer to the 60s?
So associate entry is 75 is the minimum.
I have 2 more degrees than Ray, and I did not make that coming to the university to start with. So, okay. So that's just with a bachelor's degree. And getting the internship helps because companies love to hire previous interns to be employees. But okay, so you can come in that way. So the skill of programming. Jocelyn asked a really interesting question. Were there times when you just couldn't figure something out? What did you do?
Yes. Yeah. So that is a big part of it. So when there are times that I can't figure something out, or the team maybe is struggling, that's when we that's when we need to regroup. And one thing to remember is that you're not working on these problems by yourself. You're typically working with the team. And so if I'm having trouble, then I can reach out and say, hey, this is, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me tackle this? Or let's collaborate on this. And if that continues, if we're both stumped, then we still have others to help out with this.
Great question. Where did you learn Python and Java?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I learned Python kind of just on the side, and when you say things like learn, I didn't memorize every library and function. I could use it to do stuff, and so I started picking up Python when I was just messing around with this Raspberry Pi, and just did kind of some basic things. Tried to kind of like what I said about doing math casually or programming casually, just like an environment when I I'm not doing school stuff. I'm just casually trying out Python, and that's pretty much how I learned it. With JavaScript, this was kind of one of the requirements that I saw to be in the mob programming team. So I actively used like Pluralsight and YouTube to learn JavaScript.
What is this mob programming team that you were so excited to become part of?
Yeah. So Hunter kind of created their own like programming paradigm, which is called mob programming. And the reason for that is we have about 3 to 4 people all working on the same computer. And previously in the office, we had two, they were about like 70-inch monitors, 70-inch TVs right next to each other, and a pretty nice computer, and just a long desk with like 4 keyboards at the desk. And so we'd all be looking at the same code, like all 3 or 4 of us, and working on the same problems together. And the way this worked is one person would be on the keyboard, another person would be what we call navigating, or kind of guiding the person on the keyboard, telling them, hey, like, I'm going to need a class to be made here, and let's add some private members to it and import this library. And then we would rotate driver and navigator through the people. And the reason for this is that the idea behind it is it removes the programmer from having to think about the syntax, like C++, you're thinking about like, oh, let me add the semicolon, the parentheses. So now the programmer only needs to worry about how the program is being structured. So I would just, I don't have to worry about, making sure I'm, worried about the syntax. And another benefit of this is like, you're kind of quality checking your code as you're writing it, because you have more than one eyes on it. And I know, like, with my own code, like when I write code, I have like rose-colored glasses, and I'm like, this is the best, code ever. But having other people looking at it will help you catch things that you miss, or provide valuable input. Another benefit is that it's really good for learning. We have a flat structure where each team of the 3 or 4 might have a senior software engineer and like an associate. It's randomized. And when you have teams with different skill levels, and they're working on the same code, the juniors can actually, be exposed to the more senior level like coding experience and suggestions that they have. So it helps associates learn things quickly.
Sounds like that's kind of a big adjustment, getting used to that style where you just got someone, either you're over someone's shoulder or someone's over your shoulder. Yeah, wow.
It does turn, so this is the by the book description of mob programming, but when we're actually doing it, it's very, like, it's kind of more loose and flexible, where you might have like the senior who has a good idea or context on the code, and then we have the others who is providing input, but we're also changing who's driving. So it turns into more of a collaboration of 3 or 4 people working on the code.
Really cool. Other questions from people? And let me try and remember what were some other ones that I had asked you earlier. So I guess we kind of touched on this. So what are the classes that your fellow CS and software engineering majors should really pay attention? What they should pay attention in all their classes, but what are the ones that you felt like were the most impactful in your career?
Mm-hmm. I think data structures is really important. You'll always be, especially if you're going to be doing more object-oriented practices. Database management, also very important. Just being able to being comfortable with creating tables with SQL. That was especially if you're going to go into like web development, because you're going to be interacting with some server database. And another one, it's a 400 class for CS. I think it's software engineering. That one is pretty important, as it explains the difference between waterfall development and agile development, and that'll be important for when you are actually applying for jobs and you want to see and you know which style you're more comfortable with, because it is two very different ideologies. I think one that I didn't mention before was networking. I think networking was really fun because you can apply it to like, even just the network at your house, and you can see the IP structure of all of your devices. And there was a cool project in there that actually you map out the subnet masks of all the buildings at campus. So look forward to that.
You forgot to say physics.
Yeah, no, that was last. Saving that for last.
It's okay. You're forgiven. So what's been the most surprising thing for you getting out of school, getting this job? Like, what surprised you the most about being out in the real world, being an actual engineer?
Right. So what surprised me the most was how much speaking that I would be doing, and how much I would be working with other people. So the speaking part is at some point you will need to present the thing that you made, or the progress that you've made on this item. So being able to convey that successfully is important, because we do have a lot of meetings, and even just like the retrospectives that I talked about, the morning stand-up. You're doing a presentation essentially first thing in the morning to your team and the project manager. Also, we do this thing called the monthly stand-up, or sorry, monthly update, where we it's kind of on a rotation basis, but we would present the products we made, or the new pushes that we have out, to all the higher ups in the company, including the CEO. So being able to present is pretty important. The other thing I mentioned was working with people. So I feel like at school, in CS classes, a lot of the projects were kind of a per person basis, and the group projects were like 2 to 3 people. But actually, now that I'm working at Hunter, I feel like I'm like almost constantly working with other developers and on a problem. So you're not usually going to face. You're not usually expected to handle a big problem, on your own. We're typically you'll typically have a team of people trying to work on a problem.
What about, do you do much writing as part of your job, or not really?
So when I think about writing, I do a lot of typing, yeah, um, but typing emails, not writing, not so much writing like essays or anything, but just being able to write down like an accurate update as to what we're working on, even just our Git pushes. So if you're pushing things to Git, um, or committing things, you want to be able to accurately convey um, what you've did in this change. So a lot of I guess I do a lot of typing of um, like emails, updates. Um, not, yeah, not really any sort of essays.
So like there's a separate technical writing department or, documentation. You're just commenting and just communicating basically. So,
Yeah,
okay, cool. All right. Um, any other questions? Any other thoughts?
I was not good at math, and I struggled with Calc 1. Um, I actually had to retake Calc 1, and and then I thought, how could I be a computer science major? I can't even do math. But um, you can't really take that approach. You just so what I had to do was really kind of double down and um, try to focus on uh, getting the content and going to office hours, because I was complaining, but I wasn't putting in the effort that I could have been. Um, so
Huh. I didn't know that at all. So guys, let me tell you how I know Ray. He was one of the best students in my class. He was someone who came, and not necessarily because I thought he was a natural genius or anything, obviously intelligent, but he would come to my office hours like almost all the time. There were a lot of office hours he would come to. And he had a great study group. He worked with, was it Gloria and was it Carly or
Jackie.
Jackie? Thank you, Jackie. So I think Jackie was also a chemist as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was in a study group with two awesome students, and they just worked really hard together. So, I mean, Ray would spend hours standing in front of my whiteboard just solving problems, and it was really cool. He would come in, ask questions. He wasn't afraid to. And then sometimes, a good professor will ask you questions too to see what you know and you don't know, kind of help you out. And we've talked about, I think, as you said, we've talked about internships together one time, and it's a way to kind of get to know your professors. But Ray's really done a great job just kind of having that attitude, staying motivated, finding that motivation, persisting. So I did not know that because, like I said, you were great in my class, and my class was the class that you take after you're done with calculus. So, oh, thanks for sharing. Really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Any last bits of wisdom you think they should know, or?
Yeah. I think so. Definitely don't take going to class for granted. I think it's really an opportunity. After graduating and stuff, it's actually really hard to create a lesson plan for yourself and try to learn you know all these subjects on your own. I remember thinking like, man, they really just kind of served up all this information, this good information to us just to absorb, and now I have to go and try to um you know find all this kind of stuff myself. So definitely don't take class for granted. It's really an opportunity.
That's great. Thanks. I think we owe Ray a round of applause, so virtual applause. Ray, thank you so much for this presentation. I think that was really useful. I hope you guys thought it was useful too. I guess if there are no other questions, I'm not seeing anything pop up. Ray, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. All right. Thanks for having me, and happy holidays, everyone.